Hey, it's gonna be okay.
What happened, little one?
Mom, my mom is sick.
Have you ever felt like you had everything in the world yet? Nothing at all. That's the life of Ethan Hayes, a billionaire CEO living in a luxurious penthouse. His world is built on soulless numbers and billion-dollar contracts, but deep down, it's filled with an endless pain. Until one day a fated encounter changed everything. At a street market, a 6-year-old girl with eyes far too old for her age was selling her beloved teddy bear, just to buy food for her sick mother. Can a frozen heart find warmth again? And can miracles truly happen? Join us as we uncover Ethan's journey of healing and the life-altering meeting in today's video. Ethan Hayes lived in a world of artificial perfection. His penthouse on the top floor of Boston's most magnificent tower was a masterpiece of architecture and design. The floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a sweeping view of the city where streetlights sparkled like a man-made galaxy each night. The Italian marble floor was cold, the furniture minimalist, and the abstract art on the walls was priceless. Everything was arranged with surgical precision, not a speck of dust in sight. It was a stark beauty, but it lacked the warmth of life. It was a museum where everything was displayed with solemnity, yet no one came to admire it. Ethan had built this world to hide a truth he never wanted to face: the emptiness within. Every morning he woke up alone in a bed that was too big. He drank his black coffee from a delicate glass cup, sitting sullenly by the window watching the city awaken. He didn't eat breakfast. He had no taste. Food was just the fuel his body needed to function. Similarly, his business was just a machine, and he was the brain that controlled it. He was the founder and CEO of a colossal investment fund, a name respected on Wall Street. But for him, money was no longer a measure of success. It was just soulless numbers filling meaningless voids. Sometimes he wondered why he kept going. After all, he had enough to live 10 lifetimes. He could lie on a private beach in the Caribbean, sail around the world on his yacht. But no, he still went to the office, still signed billion-dollar contracts, still remained cold and ruthless in negotiations. It was how he kept himself busy so he wouldn't have time to think about what he had lost. Being busy was a sedative, lulling the painful emotions he had tried so hard to bury. A small photo sat on his desk, its back turned to the window, away from the light. It was there like a secret he didn't want anyone to discover. It was a picture of Clara, his little girl. She had fiery red curls, big sparkling eyes, and a radiant smile like the sun. He had once had it all: a happy family life, a loving wife, and a tiny daughter. But everything was ripped apart like a precious painting, crumpled and thrown in the trash. He remembered that fateful day vividly. The phone rang, and the voice on the other end was rushed and panicked. "Daniel, it's me. I'm near Clara's school. There's been an accident. You need to get here now." His heart stopped. A cold dread seeped through his body. He raced out of his office, speeding down the highway. But the streets were gridlocked. Cars stood still like stone statues. He honked, he cursed, but it was all in vain. Every second that passed was a knife twisting in his heart. Finally, when he arrived, it was all over. He saw the crumpled car, heard the blaring sirens of the ambulance, and saw the flashing lights. A few passers-by looked at him with pity, as if they were looking at a walking corpse. Since that day, his world became silent. Life was just a song that had lost its melody. He could never forgive himself. If he had arrived just 1 minute, 1 second earlier, maybe everything would have been different. He had failed. He had failed to protect his daughter, the person he loved most in the world. After Clara's death, his wife, unable to bear the shock, left, leaving him alone with his pain and loneliness. He built an invisible wall around himself, refusing all connection, all touch. He didn't allow himself to feel, didn't allow himself to hurt. He just existed. That Saturday morning, he drove out of the city with no specific destination. He just wanted to get away from the glass walls, from the artificial perfection. His car rolled slowly along the tree-lined roads. The morning sun filtered through the young green leaves, creating dancing light spots on the pavement. He parked in a lot near the Cambridge Farmers Market, a place he had never been before. He got out of the car, blending into the crowd. The sounds of laughter, vendors' calls, the gentle tune of a violin, the scent of fresh bread and mint floating on the breeze. Everything was so full of life. Everything was the opposite of him. He passed a stall selling tulips, and his gaze lingered. A father was kneeling down, helping his daughter choose between a pink and a yellow tulip. The little girl giggled, pressing the flowers to her cheeks, her eyes sparkling with happiness. The scene was a slap in the face for Ethan. It was sharp, sudden, and it pained him to his core. He saw Clara, her red curls, her radiant smile as she ran through a field of flowers. She loved tulips, too. The memory was like a slow-motion film, every moment perfect. It was one of the few perfect days. Before the coughing fits began, before the cumbersome oxygen tank appeared before the hospital room with its sterile white walls and beeping machines, he turned away abruptly, his throat tightening. He didn't come here to be torn apart again. He walked past stalls selling beeswax candles and handcrafted birdhouses, but the pain lingered like a bruise hidden beneath his chest. He kept walking, trying to be a ghost as he always was. But then he saw the girl. On a street corner near a rickety old bakery stand, a tiny girl sat on a folded blanket. She wore an oversized lemon-yellow raincoat with a missing button. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her dark brown hair was tied into 2 uneven pigtails, and there was a smudge on her cheek. It could have been dirt, or it could have been a dried tear. In front of her was a teddy bear. Its fur was worn in many places, one leg was clumsily stitched with pink thread, and its left eye was a mismatched button. Beside the teddy bear was a bent cardboard sign with shaky scrawled letters, "Selling teddy bear. Need to buy food for my mom." Ethan stopped. All the sounds of the market, the laughter, the chatter, the distant violin faded into a blur. The only thing he could hear clearly was the rustling of the wind on the cardboard sign. He couldn't move. He stood there frozen, staring at the little girl. Lily looked up, her eyes far too old for her age. Big, brown, and steady, not fearful, not pleading, just sincere. She looked directly at Ethan, and a phrase was etched into his soul. "I brushed him with my toothbrush this morning. He's a good bear. My mom says we shouldn't give up on things that have taken care of us." The small yet firm words broke Ethan. His heart clenched, his knees buckled. Not in a dramatic, conscious way. He simply sank down as if an invisible force had drained the strength from his legs, leaving him kneeling on the pavement in front of the little girl. He stared at the teddy bear as if it were an artifact from another life, something surreal. His hands, the same hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts, trembled slightly as he reached for the edge of the cardboard sign, not knowing why he needed to touch it. Every defense he had built over the years crumbled in that single moment. Ethan didn't know how long he had been kneeling. Time seemed to have stopped. The outside world with its laughter melodies and the market's scents had all faded, leaving only him and the little girl in a private space. The wind still blew, rustling the cardboard sign, but Ethan could no longer hear anything but the sound of his own choked breath. He stared into her big brown eyes, and for the first time in years, he didn't see pity or feigned respect, but only sincerity and a deep, hidden sadness. He summoned all his strength to speak, his voice hoarse. foreign even to himself, as if it had traveled a great distance to come out. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "Lily," she replied, her voice small but firm. "But you don't have to remember it if you don't want to." The answer stunned Ethan. He blinked. This girl was not a normal child. She was used to being forgotten, used to being a shadow in other people's lives. It made his chest ache, a feeling he had tried to avoid for so long. "Why are you here alone, Lily?" he asked, his voice now softer. Lily looked towards the bakery window, her eyes blank as if staring at a painting. "My mom is sick. I told her I would find food. I was going to get a job, but I'm too small, so I brought my brother Teddy." "Brother Teddy?" Ethan repeated, suppressing a sigh. Lily nodded, patting the teddy bear's head gently. "He was scared too, but he said it was okay if I traded him for food. We talked about it." Ethan exhaled slowly. A sliver of sunlight pierced through the trees, illuminating Lily's face, softening the smudges of dirt and catching the golden flecks in her eyes. There was something unbearably fragile about her, yet she wasn't broken. No, she was holding herself together with a fierce will, like a child who had never been allowed to fall apart. He looked around. People still walked by, a few slowing down, most of them avoiding eye contact. No one stopped. No one knelt. Only he did. Ethan looked back at Lily, his voice now even more gentle. "Where is your mom?" Lily hesitated. Her fingers curled around the teddy bear's arm, then relaxed. "She's at home," she said softly. "She couldn't get up today. Her legs hurt a lot, but she still sings when she's not too tired." Ethan's world tilted. Something inside him cracked. It wasn't a loud sound, but more like an old pane of glass finally shattering after trying to hold on for too long. He remembered Clara's last days, the song she hummed when she was half conscious, the last time she held his finger with her tiny hand. He hadn't made it in time. The traffic jam, the call that came too late, the chilling silence when he entered the room. Ethan swallowed hard, his chest burning. "Lily," he said, "can I buy you some food, not for a trade, just for breakfast?" She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as if trying to measure the truth in his offer. "Just bread and milk," she said. "Not too much. My mom says we only take what we need." Ethan nodded, his eyes stinging. "Okay. And maybe a banana if they're not too green," she added as if an afterthought. "My mom needs potassium. I saw it on TV." He almost laughed, but his throat choked up and he had to look away. "Let's go," he said. Lily stood up, clutching her teddy bear. Her cardboard sign lay fluttering on the blanket. Ethan unconsciously reached out and folded it neatly under his arm. They walked in silence, gliding past stalls of flowers and jams. No one paid them any mind, or they pretended not to. A man in a $3,000 coat and a barefoot girl in a yellow raincoat, an odd pair. But Ethan didn't care. He opened the bakery door and held it for her. Lily walked in as if she were entering a cathedral. Inside, the warm air wrapped around them like a blanket, thick with the scent of cinnamon, melted butter, and fresh sourdough. It was the kind of comfort Ethan hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Too soft, too close to memory. Lily stopped just inside the threshold, her small hands squeezing the teddy bear as her big eyes took in the pastries on display. Behind the glass counter, golden croissants shimmered under the soft lights, their surfaces dusted with sugar and glaze. For a second, she was a child again. Not a caregiver, not a survivor, but just a little girl looking at pastries through a window of hope. Ethan came up beside her, ignoring the glances from other customers. A woman in yoga pants glanced their way, paused on Lily's coat, and then quickly turned away. He didn't blame her. People liked neat problems, a donation box, not real kids with dirt under their fingernails and eyes that were too old. He crouched down beside Lily, lowering his voice. "You can have anything you want, not just bread and milk." She blinked at him. "But I only have one bear. It's not a trade anymore," he said. "You're choosing." Lily stared at his face as if she still didn't believe him, as if she were waiting for a trick. Then she slowly pointed to a grilled cheese sandwich on the top shelf. "That one, please. It looks warm." Ethan nodded, stood up, and ordered 2 sandwiches, a small banana, a carton of milk, and 2 cartons of apple juice. He also instinctively ordered a cinnamon roll, remembering how Clara used to eat the middle first and leave the edges for him. As they sat by the window, Lily unwrapped the sandwich and took a careful bite. She chewed slowly, her eyes wide, with the careful deliberation of someone who didn't know when the next meal would come. Ethan said nothing. He just watched her, something twisting in his chest with every smooth movement. Halfway through the sandwich, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and wrapped the rest in a napkin. "For your mom," Ethan guessed. Lily nodded. "She says I'm the best nurse. I tell her stories and check her forehead." Ethan's fingers tightened around his paper coffee cup. He stared into the steam and let the silence hang. He wanted to ask so many questions, but he felt that too much curiosity would make her withdraw. She wasn't used to kindness. Lily shifted and then finally spoke. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, but you don't feel like a stranger." He looked up, surprised. "I don't." She shook her head. "You didn't ask if I had a dad. Most people ask that first, and then they look sad." Ethan's breath hitched. "I don't have a dad," she said matter-of-factly. "Mom says he left before I could talk, that he wasn't strong enough to stay." Ethan looked out the window. The tulip stall was still there. The father and daughter were gone, replaced by a couple laughing over glasses of lemonade. "What about you?" Lily asked abruptly. "Did you have a little girl?" Ethan's hand tightened on the cup. "I did," he said after a moment. "Her name was Clara." Lily waited, sensing there was more, but not pushing. Instead, she reached for the cinnamon roll he hadn't touched and tore off a small piece. "This is how I share with my mom," she said, offering him the soft middle part. He took it without a word. When they stepped outside, the wind had picked up. Clouds were gathering on the hills, smudging the blue sky like spilled paint. Lily pulled her coat tight, but her small frame still shivered. Ethan hesitated. "Do you want to ride home?" She tilted her head. "Does your car mind?" He smiled for the first time all day. "No, my car is lonely too." They walked to the curb, where Ethan's sleek black SUV was parked under a tree. He opened the door and helped her climb in. She looked at the leather seats as if they were made of gold. As he started the car, Lily sat very still, her eyes scanning everything. The buttons, the dashboard, the faint scent of pine from the air vents. "It smells clean," she said, "like a hospital floor." Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. As he drove, he stole glances at her in the rearview mirror. The image of her sitting in that raincoat clutching the teddy bear played on a loop in his mind. He couldn't shake it. Even now, in the silence of the car, it echoed a reminder that the world could tilt on its axis so quickly when you actually looked. He drove them to a trailer park tucked away behind an abandoned lot. Paint was peeling from the window frames. The wind rattled an empty swing set tied to a tree branch. Lily pointed to the third trailer, the one with the chipped mailbox and a faded curtain fluttering through a cracked window. "That's where we live," she said, "but don't tell anyone, okay? My mom says people think we're broken. We're not. just a little cracked in places. Ethan felt something in his throat constrict again. He followed her up the 3 wooden steps to the door. She stopped, turned back to look at him. Not with fear, but not with complete trust either. "Please don't tell anyone we need help," she said. "We're not supposed to. It makes people look at you differently." He knelt down, meeting her at eye level. "I won't tell anyone." Lily watched him for another moment, then nodded and pushed the door open. Ethan stepped inside, and the air of the mobile home enveloped him. It smelled of mildew, cough medicine, and a faint, sweet hint of lavender from an old tablecloth covering a small table in the corner. The linoleum floor was peeling at the corners, creaking under his weight. The only light came from a small window filtering through a faded curtain with tiny, once vibrant, now washed-out sunflowers. A table lamp flickered as if trying to hold onto its last breath. Ethan's senses recoiled. His body stiffened, resisting the intimacy of this space. This was not the world of boardrooms, private jets, or glass elevators to penthouses. This was survival, raw and fragile. On an old sofa, a woman was curled up under a thin blanket. Her breathing was shallow and weak, her skin pale and her lips cracked. She looked too young to be this frail. A sheen of sweat beaded on her forehead despite the chill in the room. Her legs trembled under the blanket, twitching uncontrollably. The symptoms made something in Ethan's memory stir. He had seen similar signs of depletion during Clara's worst days. Lily knelt beside her mother, one hand on her forehead, the other clutching Teddy tight to her chest. Her expression wasn't one of panic, it was worse. It was one of utter familiarity. "She gets like this when she hasn't eaten in a while," Lily whispered, her eyes never leaving her mother. "And when she runs out of medicine sometimes she sings to feel better." Ethan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He felt lost, clumsy in his expensive coat, more like an alien than a human being. A part of him screamed to leave, to run outside for air, to escape the weight pressing on his chest. But Lily turned her calm, observant eyes, meeting his, and she said softly, "She used to be a nurse, but no one helped her get back." The words hollowed him out. They echoed, lodging themselves deep in a corner of him he never let anyone see. His throat tightened. He turned toward the kitchen counter, took out his phone with trembling hands, and dialed a number. "Liam," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "Call Dr. Lee now. I don't care if he's on vacation. Tell him I'm calling. It's urgent, and he needs to get to 312 Holly Drive with a mobile medical unit." He ended the call and leaned his hands on the counter, bowing his head for a second. The smell of peppermint oil and stale toast clung to everything. But behind it there was that hint of lavender. Just a ghost of the life Alara had tried to hold together. "She sings Moon River when she's not too tired," Lily said from behind him. Ethan turned. "Why that song?" Lily shrugged. "She says she danced to it once, a long time ago, in a dress with sparkles like a chandelier." His chest tightened again. This little girl carried a world. No child should have this much burden, this many memories. He didn't know how to make it right, but he knew one thing. He wasn't walking away. Not this time. He moved to Alara's side and slowly knelt, trying not to be too big or loud. Her eyelashes fluttered. She stirred. Her voice was weak and dry as parchment. Who are you?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't know," he said softly, looking into her eyes. "Maybe someone I wish I'd been sooner." Alara blinked. Her lips tried to form another word, but the effort dissolved. Her hand lay limp beside her, twitching toward Lily, and then still. Minutes later, headlights swept across the thin curtains. A black SUV and a second medical ambulance pulled up in front. Ethan opened the door to greet them. Dr. Lee stepped out dressed in a dark wool coat and carrying a medical bag. His expression was curious, but he asked no questions. Inside, the medical team moved with quiet precision. Vitals, oxygen IVs. Their presence made the mobile home feel smaller but safer. A nurse knelt beside Lily and gently offered her a warm blanket. She took it without a word and sat back on her heels. Ethan stayed beside Alara, explaining the symptoms, giving a timeline, repeating Lily's quiet observations. Dr. Lee listened intently. When they lifted Alara onto the gurney, her head lolled, but her fingers twitched, reaching, searching. Lily stepped forward. "Mom, it's okay. You can rest. I'm coming with you." Ethan instinctively reached out, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. She didn't flinch. Her small frame leaned into him slightly, like a branch finding something to lean on. They wheeled the gurney toward the door. Ethan bent to help Lily get a small backpack from beside the sofa. It was light, too light. She looked up at him suddenly, her eyes wide with something he hadn't seen there before, panic. "I don't know what to pack," she whispered. "I've never stayed anywhere else." Ethan froze, the words etching themselves into him like glass. All the board meetings, all the mergers, all the numbers and titles he had ever collected. None of it had ever touched him like those 10 words. He knelt down to her level again, gently placing his hand over hers. "You'll have everything you need," he said softly, "and you don't have to do this alone anymore." Lily didn't answer, but she gave a single nod, and that was enough. Together they stepped out into the night. The automatic glass doors of St. Anne's private hospital whooshed open, releasing a blast of clean, sterile air, carrying the scent of antiseptic and a hint of lavender. Ethan stepped in first. Lily by his side, her small hand still gripping his as if it were the only thread anchoring her to the world. Her fingers were small but firm, holding on with a quiet desperation he remembered from Clara's last night when she had whispered, "Don't let go, Daddy." He hadn't let go then, but she had left anyway. And now there was another small hand, silently begging for something else. Safety, stability, perhaps a promise that someone would finally stay. Ethan led Lily down a quiet hallway of polished tile to a private wing he had once funded. The walls were a warm ivory, the lighting low, the furniture more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. He waved off the receptionist and spoke directly to the head nurse. "She's Alara Miller," he said, gesturing to the gurney being wheeled in. "No insurance, it doesn't matter. Run every test. Top-tier care, whatever the cost." The nurse's eyes darted to Lily, who was clutching her teddy bear with the hand not holding Ethan's. Her raincoat was still damp, the hem crusted with mud, but her face was solemn, watchful, and far too old. Ethan lowered his voice. "She'll be staying in one of the guest recovery rooms. It's non-negotiable. I want someone from pediatrics to check on her tonight. She hasn't been eating enough, possibly dehydrated. She won't say it, but she's terrified." The nurse nodded, recognizing the tone. It wasn't just wealth, but urgency laced with something much rarer: care. In the hallway, Ethan sat on a small upholstered bench next to Lily as they waited. Her head rested on his sleeve. Every so often she would glance toward the doors where Alara had disappeared. "Mom's coming back, right?" Lily whispered. "She's coming back," he said, his voice low and steady. "She's in good hands." Lily didn't reply. She just reached for his hand again and squeezed harder. Minutes later, footsteps echoed. Liam, his longtime assistant, appeared in a crisp gray jacket, looking as if he had run from a car that was still idling outside. His eyes scanned the hallway, and when he saw Ethan, they widened. "Ethan," he said, breathless. "I've been calling you all day. You disappeared." He stopped when he saw Lily. She looked up at him, wary but not afraid. She leaned a little closer into Ethan's side. Liam lowered his voice. Is this a charity case? Ethan met his gaze and slowly shook his head. No, this is a paternity case. That silenced Liam. Ethan stood up. I need you to cancel everything for the rest of the week. Clear my calendar. The board calls the dinner with the VCs the interviews, especially the interviews with the press. Liam blinked. Wait, all of it. Everything. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Liam looked at Lily again, then back at Ethan. Something softened in his expression, like a memory he hadn't known he still had. I'll handle it, he said softly. That night, Lily sat cross-legged on a large hospital bed in the guest room Ethan had arranged just down the hall from her mother's. The bed was too big for her, and her small frame seemed to disappear into the white sheets, but she looked almost peaceful. A nurse had brought her warm cocoa in a small paper cup with a smiling duck on it. She sipped it in silence, her eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Ethan sat in the armchair opposite, watching. She suddenly looked over. You don't have to stay. I know, he said, but I want to. She looked at him for another moment. Then, without a word, she reached for her teddy bear, held it out, and carefully placed it in his lap. He keeps away the bad dreams, she said. He's good at it. Ethan looked down at the frayed bear, one eye looser than the other, one foot missing stitching. Does he work for grown-ups? He asked. She shrugged. He tries. Ethan nodded solemnly and held the teddy bear to his chest. A few minutes later, Lily began to drift off. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes slowly closed. Ethan moved to the side of the bed and gently pulled the blanket higher over her shoulders. He sat with her like that, watching, listening to the steady rise and fall of her chest. It was a sound so fragile, so familiar, that it broke something inside him. He hadn't meant to cry. The tears came suddenly like a pressure valve releasing after far too long. They slid silently down his face, pooling at the corners of his mouth. He turned his head away slightly, feeling ashamed even though no one was watching. He hadn't cried like this since the day of Clara's funeral, when everything inside him had turned cold and still. But now the warmth had returned. It wasn't quite comfort, just proof that something was still alive inside him. Lily stirred. He stilled. Her voice was a soft, almost inaudible murmur. Do you think Mom will smile again? Ethan leaned down gently, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. Only if you do, he whispered. She didn't answer, but her fingers twitched on the sheet, and in that quiet room, under the hum of machines and the faint scent of cocoa, Ethan Hayes, for the first time in years, let hope take root. The morning sun rose over the Boston skyline, casting a golden sheen through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of Ethan's penthouse. But this time he wasn't there to see it. He was at the hospital, still in the same suit from the day before his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. He no longer looked like the CEO of a colossal investment fund, but a tired, sleepless man who didn't care. Lily sat in a small armchair in Alara's recovery room, a sketchpad on her lap. She was silent but focused, the tip of her tongue sticking out slightly as she drew. Ethan glanced over her shoulder and saw a crayon sketch of a building with tall glass windows and a front garden full of smiling flowers. What's that? He asked. It's where we'll live, she said matter-of-factly. When Mom's better, and if you want to come too, there's a swing with your name on it. He tried to smile, but his chest was so tight with emotion that no laugh could escape. Alara was still weak, but better than the day before. The antibiotics were working. Color had returned to her face. Dr. Lee had given a cautious nod that morning. Still, she said little, only offering gentle nods and hushed thanks punctuated by intermittent coughs. When Lily asked to go to the playroom downstairs, Ethan sat alone by Alara's side, sipping on a cup of lukewarm paper cup coffee. "You shouldn't be doing this," Alara said suddenly, her voice dry as paper. Ethan turned, startled. "Doing what, all of it? Paying for this, watching over her staying here?" He met her gaze. "Why not?" Alara coughed, then turned her face away. "Because I'm not your responsibility, neither is she." "I know," he said softly, "but maybe I need her as much as she needs me." Alara didn't reply, but she didn't argue either. That evening, Ethan took Lily home. Not to the trailer, not yet. To his penthouse. It hadn't been planned. He simply couldn't bear the thought of her sleeping on a fold-out bed in a hospital for another night or waking up alone. So he had made a call, given quiet instructions, and when they arrived, the guest room had been transformed. It was still sleek. It was Ethan Hayes' apartment, after all. But now there was a small white bed with a quilted comforter, a beanbag chair by the window, and a bookshelf filled with storybooks, crayons, and 2 brand-new sketch pads. Lily stood frozen in the doorway. I've never had a room," she said. Ethan blinked. "You mean your own room?" She shook her head. "Any room just for me." He swallowed hard. "Well, now you do." She tiptoed inside as if it would vanish if she moved too fast. Her fingers brushed against the desktop, then the window seat. Then she turned to him. "Can I draw on the wall?" He blinked. "The wall, just one corner, maybe?" Ethan hesitated, then smiled. "You can draw a mural if you want." That night, while she showered and picked out pajamas, still wearing the hospital slippers he had gotten for her, Ethan wandered around the penthouse and noticed things he had forgotten existed. A framed picture of Clara still sat on the console table in the hallway, angled away from the light as if he had tried to hide her smile. Now, for the first time in years, he turned it to face the hallway. He walked into the kitchen and stopped. On the marble island were 2 drawings Lily had left. One of him and her sitting under a tree, and the other was of Alara floating on a hospital bed surrounded by stars. He picked the drawings up gently, his fingers tracing the crayon lines. Then he chuckled softly. His likeness had a crooked tie and pink socks. When Lily emerged from the bathroom in an oversized nightshirt, she found him miserably cooking eggs. "You're burning them," she announced. "I prefer the term caramelizing." She climbed onto a bar stool and giggled. "They smell like my mom's cough medicine." He grimaced. Noted. They ended up eating cereal, and later, as Ethan tucked her in, she reached for her teddy bear and placed him in Ethan's hands again. "You'll need him tonight," she said solemnly. "Sometimes grown-ups have the scariest dreams." Ethan nodded. "I think you're right." She settled down, her eyes closing, but just before she drifted off, she murmured, "You don't look sad anymore." He didn't know how to answer, so he leaned down and whispered back, "That's because someone left a little bit of joy lying around." And then he sat in the hallway long after she was asleep, just listening to the soft breathing of a child in a safe room. His apartment, once a sanctuary of silence, now faintly echoed with life, crayon drawings, half-eaten cereal bowls, the smell of bubblegum shampoo. It wasn't chaos. It was healing. And he wasn't sure when it had happened, but he no longer felt like a visitor in someone else's life. He was home. The rain returned on a Thursday evening. Not a gentle spring shower tapping at the glass, but a furious downpour. The wind howled along the Boston skyline as if to prove a point. Ethan stood before the glass wall of the penthouse, phone to his ear, staring at the blurred lights below. He wasn't getting market updates. Not tonight. He was listening to a nurse. "She was stable this morning," he said, tense. "I know, Mr. Hayes," the nurse replied gently. "But she spiked a fever after lunch. Dr. Lee thinks it may be a secondary infection. We've started her on new antibiotics, but she's not responding as quickly as we'd hoped. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. He turned his eyes, scanning the hallway to make sure Lily was still sleeping in the guest room. "Is she conscious?" he asked. "She was for a brief period," the nurse said. "She asked for Lily and for you." Ethan's breath hitched. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up, grabbed his jacket, and walked softly into the quiet bedroom where Lily was curled under the covers, clutching the teddy bear. She stirred as he approached, her eyes squinting in the dim light. "Is Mom okay?" "She's feeling a little tired tonight," he said softly. "But I think she'd like to see you." Lily was sitting up before he finished. She slid off the bed, her bare feet padding softly on the rug. "I'll get my coat." They were at the hospital in less than 15 minutes. Rain lashed against the windshield, and Ethan's hand never left Lily's shoulder in the back seat. She held the teddy bear tight the whole way, her lips a thin line. Ilara looked worse. She lay under a layer of warm blankets, her face slick with sweat, her damp hair clinging to her cheek. Her eyes fluttered open as they walked in, but she said nothing. Her gaze went to Lily first, then to Ethan, and something fragile passed between them, a flicker of apology or perhaps resignation. Lily climbed onto the chair beside the bed. She didn't cry. She just held her mother's hand and began to hum softly, tremblingly, the melody of Moon River. Ethan stood near the door, unsure of his place, until Ilara's hand weakly lifted and beckoned him closer. He walked to her, sitting on the other side of the bed. The machines beeped in a steady rhythm. Outside the window, the city blurred behind streaks of rain. "I'm not strong enough," Ilara whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan leaned down. "Yes, you are." She shook her head. "I don't want her to see me like this." "She's not scared," he said softly. "She just wants you to come home." Ilara turned her head, her eyes glistening. "What do you want, Ethan?" He stood frozen. "I want to fix something," he said honestly. "And I think I want to stay." Ilara gave a tired smile. "That's the first true thing you've said." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know." They sat in silence for a long time. Lily had fallen asleep, her head resting against her mother's hip. Her hand still holding on to Ilara's wrist. Ethan stayed the night. He didn't call Liam. He didn't check his schedule. He pulled a chair up to the side of the hospital bed and watched the two of them breathe in unison. In the early hours, as the fever still clung and nurses moved around them like ghosts, Ethan stood alone by the window, whispering to no one. "If you're still listening, please don't take anyone else from me." He closed his eyes. The rain streaked the glass like tears on stone. He didn't believe in miracles, but he believed in Lily. And tonight that was enough to bring him to his knees. By the end of the week, Ilara's fever had broken. The color had returned to her face, her breathing was steady, and she was no longer drifting in and out of consciousness. The doctors called it progress. Lily called it a miracle. Ethan called it a reason to breathe again. They allowed Ilara to sit up for the first time on Saturday morning. Lily helped prop up the pillows behind her mother, chattering about the scrambled eggs Ethan had tried and failed to make. "He burned the toast too," she said proudly, as if it were a great adventure. Ilara gave a weak laugh. He never looked like a kitchen kind of man. "I'm evolving," Ethan muttered from the doorway. This time he carried sunflowers, the kind that always faced the light. He placed them on the windowsill next to Lily's newest drawing. It was a crayon picture of a family of 3 standing in front of a garden with a crooked tree and a birdhouse. There were no labels, no names, but the man in the picture had Ethan's tie, the woman had Ilara's scarf. The little girl had Lily's pigtails, and Teddy was tucked under one arm. He stared at the drawing for longer than he intended to. Ilara was watching him. "You've changed," she said softly once Lily had moved into the hallway to stretch. Ethan didn't turn around. "I've remembered who I was." "No," she said. "You've become the man you never thought you could be." He let out a slow breath and walked to the chair beside her. "I don't know what this is," he said, looking at neither her nor where it would lead. "But when I'm not with Lily, I miss her. When I'm not here with you, I feel like I've forgotten something important. I haven't felt anything this real since—" He trailed off, but Ilara understood. "Since Clara," she finished softly. Silence hung between them. "You're not trying to replace her, are you?" Ilara asked gently. Ethan shook his head. "No, Lily is Lily, but she's reminded me of the parts of myself I buried with Clara." Ilara watched him for a long time, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And what do you want, Ethan? I want to be the one she runs to when she's scared. I want to one day make her breakfast without burning it. I want to give her a room of her own, a life that's not on borrowed time. I want to show up, to really show up." Ilara swallowed, her voice thick. "That's not a small thing, you know." Ethan nodded. "I know." By Monday, Ilara was well enough to sit with Lily in the hospital garden, a small courtyard with benches and pansies nestled between the tall glass walls. Ethan joined them after a conference call he barely remembered. The tie was gone. The briefcase was gone. In its place was a bag of books that he and Lily had picked out together. They sat for hours talking, laughing, reading stories, and drawing imaginary creatures with chalk on the pavement. That evening, after he had settled Lily back at the penthouse for bed, Ethan poured himself a glass of water and looked out the window. His own reflection was a faint ghost on the glass. Then he picked up the phone. "Liam," he said, "find me a lawyer, one who specializes in guardianship cases." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you sure?" Liam asked. Ethan's voice didn't waver. "I've never been more sure." He met the lawyer 2 days later. They went over the papers, discussed timelines, and talked about contingencies. The lawyer asked him hard questions. Why now was he prepared to take responsibility? What if Ilara didn't make a full recovery? Ethan answered each question not with a CEO's slickness, but with the raw clarity of a man who had finally decided to step into a role that life had been waiting for him to take. In the meantime, Lily had settled into the penthouse as if she had always belonged there. Her drawings now adorned the refrigerator. Her tiny socks appeared in the laundry pile. Her laughter echoed from the living room like music from a forgotten radio. And Ilara, she began to walk slowly, carefully, each step fueled by hope and a stubborn courage. One afternoon, as they sat together on the balcony Ethan had never used before, Ilara reached out and took his hand. "I was so sure I was going to die alone," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore," Ethan said. They didn't speak for a long time, but they didn't have to. Because for the first time in years, Ethan Hayes wasn't just a man who had lost everything. He was a man who had chosen to begin again. The apartment smelled different. No longer the sterile scent of polished marble and expensive wood. It was the smell of lavender soap, burnt toast, cinnamon oatmeal, and something else Ethan couldn't name. Perhaps it was joy. Perhaps it was belonging. Or maybe it was just the echo of small feet on the hardwood floor at 7 a.m. It was a Saturday. The warm sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, painting golden patterns on the living room rug. Lily was in the kitchen, her curly hair tied up in a messy bun with one of Ethan's silk ties. She stood on a stool, her elbows deep in pancake batter, determined to make them look exactly like the ones in the videos. Alara leaned against the kitchen counter, the color back in her cheeks, her body growing stronger each day. She wore one of Ethan's old hoodies, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and a smile that had been absent from her face for years. Ethan stood by the stove in his pajama pants and a t-shirt, flipping pancakes that were only slightly burned this time. Lily beamed. "These are a little less black than last week's." He grinned. "Progress." After breakfast, they wandered out to the rooftop garden Ethan had almost forgotten existed. Once a sterile ornamental space, it had become a neglected mess of pots and a concrete slab for years. But today it had color. Lily had insisted on planting marigolds and sunflowers because they looked like fireworks and smiles. A gardener Ethan had hired came twice a week, but it was Lily's hands that had given the place its life. They sat together on a bench, a small trio in the shade of a potted tree. Lily leaned against Alara, humming softly. Teddy, recently restitched with Ethan's help, lay beside her, looking much less tattered than when they first met. Ethan turned to Alara. "The lawyer filed the guardianship papers yesterday." Alara nodded, her hand gently stroking Lily's curls. "Thank you." He looked at her. "Are you sure this is what you want?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I want her to have someone who will never leave, someone who will never forget to come back." Ethan's chest tightened. "I never will." Alara reached out and squeezed his hand. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping romance, just quiet trust. And in that there was something more profound than anything he had ever known. Later that afternoon, as Ethan tucked Lily in for her nap, she reached up and touched his cheek. "Do I have to go back to the trailer when Mom is all better?" Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. "No, not unless you want to." She paused. Can I have a key to this place?" "Forever." His throat choked up. "I'll do something even better than that," he whispered. He pulled out a small wrapped box from a drawer. Inside was a locket on a delicate gold chain. On one side was a picture of Alara, on the other a miniature crayon drawing by Lily of the three of them. Lily gasped. "It's us." Ethan nodded. "Wherever you go, we'll go too." She threw her arms around his neck. "You really aren't leaving, are you?" He held her tight. "Never in a million years." That evening, the three of them sat in the garden again, sipping cocoa as string lights twinkled overhead. The city hummed below, but here it was quiet. There was only the rustle of leaves, the clink of mugs, and the giggle of a child on the wind. Alara leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. Lily sat at their feet, drawing again. This time she sketched a small house with an open door, flowers on the windowsill, and 3 stick figures holding hands under the sun. She proudly held it up. "Look, it's us at home." Ethan looked at the picture, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a man trying to rebuild something lost. He felt like a man who had found something new, not a replacement, not a distraction, but a family. Home, he realized, wasn't a place you lived in. It was the people you stayed for. Thank you for joining us on this moving journey. The story of Ethan, Lily, and Alara shows us that sometimes it's in our most desperate moments that we find the true meaning of life. Happiness isn't something that can be bought with money. It's about presence, compassion, and the love we share with one another. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and leave a comment below. We'll see you in the next video where we'll explore more meaningful stories together.